some wicked talent from Manchester direct, believe it. This is the new setting, believe me, the live shit, believe me, jungle, hip hop, everything's blending, you know what I mean? Shout going out to Subliminal Dinosaur, the crew round about ya. Shout going out to Eardrum, all the people's in the place to be skin. And respect, like as far as your skin. We go like
Have you ever wanted to be on your own for a while? Ever wanted to let someone else take control? Have you ever wanted to leave everything behind for a few days? In 1998, a unique event will take place. You will have the chance to be kidnapped. Pay a small registration fee and you're instantly added to the hit list. A lucky winner will then be snatched in broad daylight. Held for a short period of time, you will be released unharmed. This is not a game. This is not a joke. Call 0800 174 336 for details. Now.
To build a memory system for a computer. That was what they wanted to do. Using the cathode ray tube, which I've explained, they wanted to make a memory system for computers. I'm Chris Burton, a member of the Computer Conservation Society and project manager of the Rebuild project. I wrote down a proposal at the end of 1994 is to do this Rebuild project, and on page 3 I wrote down the goal of this project: to rebuild the small-scale experimental machine and to rerun the world's first program precisely 50 years later, at 11 o'clock in the morning, on the 21st June 1998. Simple goal.
Yeah.
Why do we want to do that? Set of objectives to support that. First objective, to be a tangible tribute to the engineers in Manchester and elsewhere who ushered in the age of computing, the second industrial revolution. You ask people about steam engines, they'll say James Watt or Trevithick or Newcomen. You ask them about computers, they may, if you're lucky, say Alan Turing, but more likely say Bill Gates. And they don't know names like Williams, Kilburn, Wilkes, von Neumann, and the people who actually ushered in this age of computing. So it's a tangible tribute to those people. And the second thing is to point out a triumph of British innovation. This was a British thing, and computers don't always come from Taiwan and America, etc. So, and the third objective is for people to come to the museum and look at the technology that was used and compare it with what's in their mobile phone or their Tamagotchi or their calculator. The technology was quite different from anything that children are familiar with today, and that people need to be faced with that to see with what the pioneers were faced with and what a wonderful event it was in June 1948, using such incredible, crude looking stuff to have to achieve such a wonderful thing. They built, therefore, this general purpose computer, and through June they'd got it more or less complete because it didn't work. They were trying to improve it and make adjustments so that it worked. And to prove that it was a computer, of course, what a computer does is run a program. So they would put in a program using the push buttons and switches to load the program and see whether it worked. And they kept doing that day after day during June, and it didn't work. And then the glorious day, they arrived on Monday the 21st, and no doubt they started at 8:30 in the morning, loaded the program, tried it, didn't work, go and adjust this, adjust something else, try. And at 11 o'clock they'd made the right adjustments such that the thing was now reliable enough, and they could load the program, and it ran successfully. First time in the world that a program had run on a computer. And what the program was something that Tom Kilburn had written to find the highest factor of a number. That's to say, what is, given a number, what's the biggest number which will divide into it exactly? So if you've got number 10, the biggest number that divide into that exactly is 5. So they put numbers in to see what's the biggest number, what's the highest factor that was what the program did. And they would try small numbers like 19 or 31, and it would just run for a few seconds, and eventually, as I say, it successfully gave the right answer. And that was the first time in the world. And that's why it's such a historic event, because its relationship in representing this with a universal machine with a program in it. And that's what modern computers are. The importance of this machine and the importance of the date, the 21st of June 1948, is quite simple. It was the first time in the world that a stored program had run on a computer. There had been computers before that, the ENIAC in the United States and other machines, but really they were more what we would now call a calculator. What they did was really more or less fixed. They could only do one job. And yet Alan Turing, before the war, had enunciated the principle of a universal computing machine, able to solve any solvable problem. And he worked out, as it were, the principles of what was needed for such a machine. One of the things you need for such a machine is a memory to keep not only the table of instructions, what we call the program, but the data as well, and which the computer can manipulate, so it can change its own instructions, if you like. Now, with these kind of attributes, it becomes a universal machine, and this is such a thing. The way of characterizing that is to say anybody who's familiar with a computer today in the 1990s, they know about their computer on the desk, and you say to them, what's it like? And after getting through the business about what colour it is, what it really like is, today I do word processing, and I put a program in to do that. Tomorrow I play a game, I put a program. Or I do a spreadsheet and put a program. The characteristic of a computer is it's a machine which does any sort of job depending on the program you put in it. Now then, if I take people back through the generations of computers with that principle in mind, they will eventually come to this baby machine. Is that like your computer? And the answer is Yes, it is like it. The technology is different. It's not so powerful, but I put a program in and it can do a job at a different program, and there was no earlier computer than that. So this was the first computer, anything like modern computers. The original computer was built in about 9 months, from late 1947 up until June 1948, when they ran the first program. Now, the way the storage system worked, the memory system worked on this computer, that was the research work which Williams and Kilburn were doing. And it works something like, without going into all the details, it works something like this. This is a cathode ray tube. These were commonly used in radar during the Second World War, and it's just the same in principle as the cathode ray tube in a television set and so on. There's a screen at this end, and that glows with light when the electron beam comes up from the end of the tube, and you can make patterns on this two-dimensional face. Now, what Williams and Kilburn discovered was that when that electron beam comes up inside the glass, it made little electrical charges on the inside which could be detected with a wire mesh on the outside, like that. Imagine a wire mesh on the outside of the glass, and every time the beam came up and struck the inside, a little tiny signal was detected on that, and they could charge the screen up to be either a 0 or a 1 in one of any of the 1,000 points on the surface. And the point is that the little tiny signal picked up on this mesh would then be amplified by an amplifier and regenerated and fed back into the tube, so that there was a kind of circulation like that, and that was the memory of the tube, of the system, the system memory. And they, by having a pattern of dots on here, you could store 1,000 separate binary digits,
right, which
constitute numbers, and that's what the engineers wanted, to store numbers. You have to remember that in a program of instructions for a computer, each instruction can be regarded as a number. It's only the way the computer interprets that number. It either interprets it as, oh, I'm ready for an instruction now, or I'm ready for some data now. So it's the way the computer interprets this binary pattern, whether it's an instruction or not. So they created this memory system based on this cathode ray tube storage, and the point about it was it had quite a large capacity, 1,000 binary digits, and it was very fast. It worked at electronic speeds.
Right. And
that was what was important for an electronic computer, that the memory system should be fast enough to keep. Today is a different matter. All the effort that's gone into it is voluntary. And we can say something like 11,000 man-hours of effort, of volunteer, unpaid effort, together with the contribution of ICL, buying parts, making metal parts for us, doing painting and all sorts of things that we needed doing by them. And that probably comes to well over £100,000. Really? Clearly, tens, scores of thousands of pounds, I don't know, right, in money of the time. Let's consider the memory capacity. Now, this had 1,024 bits. That's the equivalent of 128 bytes. That's what we measure memory capacity in bytes. 128 bytes. Now you consider the modern laptop or desktop computer in the 1990s. Not unusual to have 16 million bytes or more. So there's an enormous increase in capacity. Very interesting, though, that the kind of memory in modern computers, the so-called random access memory, works on a very similar principle to this cathode ray tube memory. It worked by having little electrostatic charges on an insulator which periodically have to be refreshed and regenerated. That's just what is in dynamic random access memory in modern computers. An interesting parallel, but of course this is a vacuum device. Modern things use transistor or solid state devices. So in terms of memory capacity, an enormous step forward. Now, another measure is the speed at which it can execute instructions. This old machine could execute instructions at 700 instructions per second. 700 per second. Your modern laptop can easily do 10 million instructions per second. An enormous step forward. And lastly, of course, things like the complexity of the instructions. The instructions on the old machine are incredibly simple and very almost trivial in what they can do, whereas in the modern desktop computer, very powerful instructions, multiply and divide and all sorts of complex instructions which the old machine didn't have. So in all these measures, there's been an enormous advance, but it's only a question of scale and the technology. The principle is exactly the same.
Equipment that we made our very first records with, which was about 2 weeks old at the time, was actually a piece of digital equipment, the AMS digital delay machine, which we now, strangely enough, have a relationship with AMS out of Burnley, and it's a wonderful piece of equipment. But I was aware that this piece of equipment was doing strange things in the studio, and in fact, as one looks back on history now, it changed the way that we hear drums. That's what I'm right. Rehearsal room, very dark evening, and I watched him walk across the far side of the room. And as he was going towards Steve's desk, I just had this immediate flash. I knew that Peter was about to encounter his first floppy disk.
Right.
And so that shows you what age we're talking about. That no one, this was a very rare thing. And there he was. He saw his first floppy disk, the old big things, and I knew what would happen. That went on to cost our company. That turned out to be the sleeve of the biggest selling 12-inch single in history, and every one that we sold we lost 2p on. So the more it sold, the more money we lost, and that was because he insisted on having seen this thing and getting excited on having the cutouts that were on the floppy disk, and the cutouts, so the 12-inch LP sleeve had these complex cutouts that exactly mirror the first generation floppy disk. So I mean, all along, from 5 years ago when we started shouting about this anniversary coming up, is that on the Sunday night, the 21st of June, on CNN around the world, there'll be 30 seconds of the minister receiving the gift of this amazing physical monster, the world's first computer, in the Museum of Science and Industry. And just to get that image across to the world is the main effort.
Right.
And to make a point to the world, and to remind ourselves that we're in Manchester. I didn't know we'd invented the computer when I was 32 years old, so it's nice for people to know that in terms of the self-imaging of Manchester, not just the whole of the first industrial revolution, but the whole of the second.
Yeah.
Just a nice additional thing, and maybe to encourage businesses